The air on Xylo's station tasted like recycled regret and ozone. Ryder leaned against a bulkhead slick with the condensation of 1,000 different species, exhalations, and decided he was well and truly galactically screwed. His last few krells had been spent on a nutrient paste that had the consistency of industrial lubricant and the flavor of disappointment. He was a master-certified hyperdrive technician, a warp coil whisperer, and a man who could jury-rig a coffee machine out of a plasma torch in sheer desperation. Yet here he was, unemployed and about 2 missed meals away from chewing on his own boots. Humans were the new kids on the galactic block. Barely a standard decade since first contact, humanity was still a novelty, a weird little biological footnote from a high-gravity death world in an unfashionable spiral arm of the galaxy. Most established species viewed them with a mixture of morbid curiosity and profound confusion. They were soft, squishy, bipedal omnivores who lacked natural armor, exoskeletons, or even a decent set of mandibles. Their primary method of communication involved flapping wet pieces of meat inside their food holes to make noises. It was, by all accounts, disgustingly primitive. And worse, they were persistent. Alex checked his datapad for the 40th time. The job posting was still there, flickering in sterile Concord Standard. The freighter Stardust Drifter, a K-class hauler, needed a systems engineer. The pay was listed as negotiable, which was galactic code for abysmal. The ship's captain, a Genar named Kalen, was conducting interviews in Docking Bay 73. It was a long shot. Genar were notoriously fastidious and preferred crew from species who understood rigid hierarchies and didn't leak saline solution from their ocular sensors when they were frustrated. Still, desperation was a powerful motivator. He pushed himself off the wall and trudged towards the docking bay, the worn soles of his boots squeaking on the grimy deck plates. Docking Bay 73 was a cavern of echoing noise and fluttering repair drones. In the center of the organized chaos sat the Stardust Drifter. She wasn't a beauty. Her hull was a patchwork of mismatched plates, scarred by micrometeoroids and what looked suspiciously like a poorly buffered plasma blast. She looked less like a starship and more like a collection of spare parts flying in loose formation. Home sweet home, potentially. A ramp extended from the ship's main airlock, at the bottom of which stood a creature that could only be the captain. Kalen was a Genar, all 7 feet of him. His scales were the color of burnished bronze, his head was long and crocodilian, and a pair of nictitating membranes blinked sideways over intelligent, gold-flecked eyes. He held a datapad in his 3-fingered claws, radiating an aura of weary impatience. Alex squared his shoulders and approached. "Captain Kalen, I'm Ryder, here about the engineer position." The Genar's head swiveled slowly, his eyes appraising Alex from head to toe. The gaze lingered on Alex's soft-looking jumpsuit, his exposed face, and his utterly useless-looking 5-fingered hands. "A human," Kalen rumbled, his voice a low vibration that Alex felt in his teeth. "Your species is new and soft. We prefer the term aesthetically unchitness," Alex said with a deadpan expression. "And I can assure you, my ability to realign a mismatched energy conduit is not dependent on my personal squishiness factor." One of the Genar's thin, scaly lips curled back in what might have been a smile or a prelude to a meal. "Your application stated you have experience with antiquated fusion cores. The Drifter runs on a Mark IV Tarsus drive. It is a relic." "I was lead engineer on the colony ship Endurance," Alex replied, letting a bit of pride seep into his tone. "Our ship was basically a flying museum. I've coaxed life back into systems that were obsolete before your grandparents hatched. I can handle a Mark IV. Kalen made a soft, clicking sound in his throat. "Your species has a very short lifespan. Your grandparents were likely recent." "Look, Captain," Alex sighed, dropping the pretense. "I'm broke. You're desperate. Your ship looks like it's held together with hope and industrial-grade adhesive. You need an engineer who can think on his feet because, judging by this rust bucket, your feet are about to fall off. I'm that engineer. I don't need fancy diagnostics. I can tell you what's wrong with an engine just by the specific pitch of its death whine." The Genar stared at him for a long, silent moment. Alex could practically hear the gears turning in that reptilian brain, weighing the sheer absurdity of hiring a soft, short-lived mammal against the very real possibility of his ship's power core imploding on its next run to the Persei Traverse. "You have your own tools?" Kalen finally asked. Alex patted the worn satchel at his hip. "Everything I need to get started." "Your dietary requirements are complex," Kalen noted, consulting his datapad. "You consume both floral and faunal matter, cooked." "Guilty as charged. I'm an adventurous eater," Alex said, "but I can live on nutrient paste if I have to, just as long as I can get my hands on some roasted bean extract." Kalen's brow ridges furrowed. "Roasted bean extract. Coffee. It's a mild neurostimulant, keeps me from murdering people before my first system diagnostic of the day." The Genar's sideways blink was slow and deliberate. "You require a chemical to refrain from homicide." "It's a cultural thing," Alex said smoothly. "You wouldn't understand. The position pays 3,000 krells per cycle, plus a 1% share of cargo profit," Kalen stated, clearly deciding to ignore the homicidal tendencies of this strange, fleshy applicant. "Your first cycle's pay is probationary. If you break my ship, I will leave you on the first uninhabited rock we pass." "If I break your ship, Captain, it's because it was already broken and I was just the last one holding the wrench." "But deal," Alex said, extending a hand. Kalen looked at the offered appendage with distaste before giving it a brief, firm shake with his claws, careful not to puncture the skin. "Welcome aboard the Stardust Drifter, Engineer Ryder. Try not to bleed on the deck plating." As Alex walked up the ramp, he couldn't help but grin. It was a wreck, the captain was a grump and the pay was garbage, but it was a job. And in the vast, uncaring void of space, a job was a start. A very, very weird start. The inside of the Stardust Drifter smelled of ozone, hot metal, and something vaguely fungal. The corridor walls were a testament to the ship's long and likely unprofitable history, dented and scuffed in 1,000 places. Wires snaked along the ceiling in thick, dusty bundles, secured by a haphazard mix of magnetic clamps and what looked like plastic zip ties. Kalen led him through the ship with the plodding, deliberate gait of his species. "This is the main cargo bay. It can hold 200 metric tons of refined ores or one very angry Cathar nesting colony. A long story." They passed a mess hall that consisted of a single metal table and 4 dispensers built into the wall. One was labeled nutrient paste grade C, another mineral suspension, and a third hydration fluid. The fourth was dark and bore a hand-scrawled sign that read broken, "Do not touch." "That means you, Zil." "Zil is our pilot and communications officer," Kalen explained without being asked. "She is a Cathar. She is energetic." As if on cue, a creature zipped around the corner, moving with a speed that was unnerving. Zil was insected, about 4 feet tall, with a slender, segmented body, 6 delicate limbs, and 2 large, multifaceted eyes that shimmered with 1,000 tiny reflections. A pair of gossamer wings, currently folded against her back, twitched with latent energy. She stopped abruptly in front of them, her antennae vibrating. "Ooh, a new one," she chirped, her voice a series of high-pitched clicks and whistles that the universal translator in Alex's ear rendered as slightly manic English. "Is this the replacement for Gorvok? He was so leaky. The new one is squishy and pink." "This is Engineer Ryder," Kalen rumbled. "He is a human. He will be maintaining the ship systems." Zil's head tilted, her multifaceted eyes taking in every detail of Alex. "A human from Terra. Oh, I have read the initial contact reports. High-gravity, water-based endoskeletal, and you do that thing with the face muscles to show emotion." "Do one," Alex blinked. "Do one what?" "An emotion, show me happiness." "The report said you bare your teeth." Feeling deeply awkward, Alex offered a small, tight-lipped smile. "Fascinating," Zil chirped, leaning closer. "It is both menacing and oddly symmetrical. Can you also secrete liquids from your ocular glands when you are sad? I hear that is a thing." "Zil, cease your interrogation," Kalen interrupted. "The engineer needs to see his station." Right, business," Zil said, zipping backward. "Welcome aboard, squishy pink one. Don't touch my navigation console. It is a finely tuned instrument of celestial poetry, not a perch for your fleshy hindquarters." With that, she buzzed off down the corridor. "You will get used to her," Kalen said. It did not sound like a promise. Their final stop was the engine room. It was the heart of the ship, a cramped, hot space dominated by the colossal cylindrical housing of the Mark IV Tarsus drive. The air thrummed with its barely contained power. Control panels, a mix of modern touchscreens and ancient-looking physical switches, lined one wall. Standing before the main diagnostic panel was the fourth member of the crew. He was a Borak, a species that resembled a bear that had decided to evolve for space travel by getting bigger and hairier. He stood at least 8 feet tall, with a massive, muscular frame covered in thick, brown fur. He turned as they entered, his small, black eyes fixing on Alex. "Engineer Ryder, this is Gruck," Kalen said. "He is our security and cargo specialist." Gruck grunted. The sound was deep and final. "Gruck doesn't say much," Kalen added unnecessarily. "Nice to meet you," Alex said, offering a hand. Gruck just stared at it until Alex awkwardly let it drop. "The engineering console is yours." Kalen gestured to a dusty corner with a rickety chair and a screen that was flickering erratically. "All system schematics are in the main database. I expect a full diagnostic report by the end of this rotation. Do not blow us up." With that, the captain turned and left, Gruck following him like a large, furry shadow. Alex was left alone in the humming, groaning heart of his new home. He ran a hand over the console, feeling the vibration of the ancient drive. It was a mess. The power fluctuations were all over the place, the coolant lines were running hot, and there was an intermittent energy spike in the secondary plasma injector that was probably one cycle away from slagging half the room. He grinned. It was a complete disaster. He was going to love it. He pulled his multi-tool from his satchel and popped open a panel beneath the console. A cascade of fried wires and scorched components greeted him. "Okay, girl," he murmured to the ship. "Let's see what kind of trouble you've gotten yourself into." His first official act as engineer of the Stardust Drifter was to fix the broken, do not touch, dispenser in the mess hall. He traced the power failure back to a simple blown fuse, a 5-minute fix. Curious, he rerouted power to it and waited. With a hiss and a gurgle, the machine sputtered to life and deposited a steaming mug of dark, aromatic liquid. Coffee? It was a coffee machine. He took a sip. It was terrible, synthesized coffee, but it was the best thing he'd tasted in months. He was leaning against the dispenser, savoring the moment, when Zill zipped into the mess hall. She stopped dead, her antennae quivering as she sniffed the air. "What is that smell? It is alarming, like burnt vegetation and ambition." "It's coffee," Alex said, taking another sip. "The roasted bean extract I mentioned." Zill approached cautiously, her multifaceted eyes wide. "The homicide prevention chemical, you just made it, from the broken thing." The broken thing was a coffee machine. And it wasn't broken, just neglected. Kalen said it was a relic from a species that went extinct from overstimulation, she buzzed. "He said it was dangerous." Alex chuckled. "Well, he's not wrong about the stimulation part." He offered the mug to her. "Want to try?" Zill leaned in, her proboscis extending slightly to taste the steam. She recoiled instantly. "It is bitter and hot. Why would you consume a hot, bitter poison for pleasure?" "It's an acquired taste," Alex said. "It focuses the mind, helps you see the patterns in the chaos." Zill considered this, her head tilting back and forth. "The chaos of our engine, perhaps. Kalen is very worried about the drive. He says it sings the song of imminent doom." "It's not singing, it's moaning in pain," Alex corrected her. "But I can fix it. Just need to bypass the primary coolant regulator and reroute the flow through the secondary heat sinks. It's a bit unorthodox, but it should stabilize the core temperature." Zill's eyes widened. "Bypass the primary regulator? The manual says that is inadvisable, catastrophically inadvisable." Alex took a long, slow sip of his coffee. "Manuals are written by people who have never had to fix a 50-year-old engine with a wrench and a string of curse words. The manual assumes you have the right parts. I assume the ship is actively trying to kill me. It's a different mindset." He left Zill staring at the coffee machine as if it were a caged predator and headed back to the engine room, feeling more optimistic than he had in weeks. The crew was weird, the ship was a death trap, and the coffee was terrible. Things were finally looking up. The first few cycles aboard the Stardust Drifter fell into a strange but comfortable rhythm. Alex would wake up, coax the ancient coffee machine into producing its burnt offering, and then spend the next 10 hours wrestling with the ship's decaying innards. He replaced corroded conduits, patched life support systems with sealant he'd synthesized himself, and recalibrated sensors that hadn't been accurate since the last galactic alignment. He discovered the ship had a personality, stubborn, cantankerous, and prone to throwing tantrums in the form of power surges at the worst possible moments. He'd started talking to it, cajoling and sometimes threatening the various systems into cooperation. Zil, for her part, had become his unofficial shadow. Her initial fascination with his squishiness had morphed into a boundless curiosity about all things human. She would hover near the engine room entrance, peppering him with questions while he worked. Is it true humans tell each other falsehoods for entertainment? You call it sarcasm, she'd chirped one cycle, as Alex was elbow-deep in a malfunctioning atmospheric scrubber. It's one of our most cherished art forms, Alex grunted, tightening a bolt. It's how we show affection without all the awkwardness of actual emotional vulnerability. Fascinating. So when you told Captain Kalen that his plan to navigate the asteroid field was a stroke of genius that would surely be taught in academies for generations to come, you were being affectionate. Something like that, Alex said with a smirk. Mostly I was just amazed we didn't end up as a new crater on some nameless rock. His relationship with Kalen remained professional and distant. The GNR captain was a being of few words and even fewer compliments. But Alex noticed that his critiques of Alex's methods had softened from outright skepticism to grudging acceptance. After Alex had stabilized the drive core using his catastrophically inadvisable bypass, the ship's telltale death whine had faded to a manageable hum. Kalen hadn't said thank you, but he had transferred a small bonus of 200 krells to Alex's account with the note for preventative maintenance. For a GNR, that was practically a declaration of undying loyalty. Gruck remained an enigma. The big Borak would occasionally watch Alex work, his massive form filling the doorway, his silence a heavy presence. He never offered help, but he never interfered either. Once, when Alex dropped a heavy hydrospanner from a ladder, a massive furry arm had shot out and caught it inches from his head. Gruck had simply placed the tool back in his hand and grunted before lumbering away. Alex had taken that as a sign of progress. They were hauling a cargo of rare Tibanian crystals from the Xylos system to a refinery on Kelvin Prime. It was a standard, boring milk run, perfect for a ship and crew just getting to know each other. The boredom was shattered 3 days out from Kelvin. Unscheduled energy reading, Zil's voice crackled over the ship-wide comm. Aft port quadrant, it is strange, not a ship signature. Alex was in the crawl space beneath the bridge, rerouting a faulty comms line. He shimmied out and jogged to the cockpit. Kalen was already at the main view screen, his reptilian eyes narrowed. Gruck stood silently behind the captain's chair. The view screen showed nothing but the endless black velvet of space, sprinkled with the diamond dust of distant stars. But the sensor display was painting a different picture. A faint, web-like pattern of energy was expanding towards them. It's a net, Kalen rumbled, his claws tapping on the console. An energy-dampening net. Scravers? Alex felt a cold knot form in his stomach. He'd heard stories about scravers on the station. They weren't pirates in the traditional sense. They didn't board and plunder. They were scavengers. They disabled ships with energy nets that fried every system. Then they tore the helpless vessels apart for scrap, usually not bothering to check if the crew was still alive inside. Shields up. Full power, Kalen commanded. Shields are fluctuating. The net is interfering with the power conduits. Zil chirped, her usual energy now laced with panic. Her 6 limbs flew across her console, a blur of motion. On the main screen, the faint web pattern flared to life, a brilliant blue lattice of energy that shot towards them with impossible speed. Brace for impact, Kalen roared. The net hit them not with a bang, but with a sickening thud that resonated through the entire ship. The lights flickered violently, then died, plunging the bridge into darkness, save for the red glow of emergency alerts. The hum of the engine ceased, replaced by an eerie, profound silence. Report! Kalen's voice was a low growl in the dark. All systems are dead, Zil's voice was a trembling whistle. Drive core offline. Life support on emergency battery, but it's draining fast. Comms are gone. We're a brick. Alex was already pulling a panel off the wall, his flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. The net must have caused a cascade failure. It overloaded every primary system at once. "Can you fix it?" Kalen demanded. "Fix it. Captain, the entire power grid has been flash-fried. Rerouting isn't an option. I'd have to manually reset every single power relay on the ship, starting from the emergency battery and working my way back to the drive core. That would take hours, maybe days." "We do not have days," Kalen said grimly. He pointed a claw at the view screen, which had flickered back to life on low power. A ship was resolving out of the darkness. It was ugly, a brutal-looking vessel that looked like it had been welded together from the wrecks of 100 other ships. Scraver markings adorned its hull. "They are launching grappling lines," Zill reported, her voice small, "and cutting torches." Gruck let out a low, guttural growl, his massive fists clenching and unclenching. This was it. They were about to be dissected like a lab frog, piece by screaming piece. The alien crew reacted as their instincts dictated. Kalen stood his ground, a stoic captain ready to go down with his ship. Zill was vibrating with fear, her wings fluttering uselessly. Gruck braced himself for a fight he knew he couldn't win. They were prey, caught in a trap, waiting for the inevitable. But Ryder was a human, and his instincts were very, very different. Something cold and quiet settled over him. The panic vanished, replaced by a razor-sharp focus. The background chatter in his mind went silent. He wasn't thinking about the fried power grid anymore. He wasn't thinking about the impossible odds. He was thinking about the problem, the immediate problem. And the immediate problem was that someone was trying to break into his house. "Zill," Alex said, his voice eerily calm. "Where are they cutting?" "Hull section Gamma 7, near the aft cargo bay," she whispered. "Gruck," Alex said, turning to the huge Borak. "I need the biggest, heaviest wrench you can find." Now, Gruck looked at him, confused, but the human's sudden change in demeanor was compelling. The quiet engineer was gone. In his place was something cold and hard. The Borak gave a short nod and lumbered out of the bridge. "Engineer, what are you planning?" Kalen asked, his golden eyes fixed on Alex. He saw no fear in the human's face, only a chillingly placid determination. "A more hands-on approach to system maintenance," Alex replied, pulling his multi-tool from his belt and selecting a sharpened, high-density pry-bar attachment. He hefted it in his hand. It felt solid, comforting. On Terra, humanity hadn't climbed to the top of the food chain by being the strongest or the fastest. They'd done it by being the smartest, the most adaptable, and when necessary, the most brutally violent creature on the planet. They were persistence hunters, tool users, and cooperative killers. They were the apex predators of a world where everything was trying to eat them. For 10,000 years, that part of their DNA had been sleeping, papered over by civilization and society. But it never truly went away. It was just waiting. Gruck returned, holding a massive, meter-long industrial wrench that was normally used for tightening the drive core's magnetic clamps. It probably weighed 30 kilograms. He handed it to Alex. Alex took it with both hands, testing its weight, its balance. It felt good. "Stay on the bridge," Alex told them. "Lock the door behind me, and try not to be alarmed by any loud noises." He walked out of the bridge, the heavy wrench resting on his shoulder. Kalen watched him go, a profound sense of unease washing over him. He had hired a soft, squishy engineer. He was beginning to suspect he had made a terrible, terrible miscalculation. The ship was being boarded by violent marauders, and his new crew member's response was to grab a heavy piece of metal and go for a walk. It was utterly illogical. It was completely insane. And for the first time since the net had hit, Kalen felt a flicker of something other than despair. He felt a sliver of terrifying hope. The corridor leading to the aft cargo bay was dark, lit only by the faint, pulsing red of the emergency lighting. The only sound was the faint creak of stressed metal and the distant, high-pitched screech of the scravers, cutting torches against the hull. Alex moved silently, his boots making no sound on the deck. The wrench was heavy in his hands, an anchor of purpose in the chaos. He wasn't thinking, not in the traditional sense. His mind was a quiet, efficient machine processing data, threat assessment, environmental analysis, weaponry. The scravers were cutting through Gamma 7. That put them right next to the secondary life support junction. A junction that, he remembered from the schematics, contained a high-pressure coolant conduit. a very flammable, very explosive coolant when exposed to a sudden atmospheric change, and an ignition source. An ignition source like, say, a plasma-cutting torch. He reached the junction panel, a mess of pipes and labeled valves just a few meters from where the hull was beginning to glow cherry red from the external heat. He pulled his multi-tool out and began to work on the emergency release valve for the coolant line. It was designed to be opened with a specialized tool, but a focused burst from his own plasma cutter at the locking mechanism would bypass it. It was risky. If he timed it wrong, he'd vent the coolant into the ship. If he timed it right, the screeching from outside stopped. A heavy, rhythmic clanging began. They were trying to break the weakened hull plate inward. Alex worked faster, sweat beading on his forehead despite the corridor's chill. The lock was thick. His cutter was small. "Come on, you bastard." With a final, satisfying hiss, the lock mechanism slagged. The valve was free. Now all he needed was an opening. With a deafening groan, the section of the hull the scravers had been working on buckled inward, torn open like a can. For a moment, there was a void black rectangle in the side of the ship, stars glinting in the silence. Then the first scraver squeezed through. It was a V-Risk. Alex had only seen them in threat identification databases. It was a nightmare of chitin and claws, taller than a human, unnaturally thin, with 4 spindly legs and 2 long, scythe-like arms. Its head was a triangular wedge of black carapace with multiple glowing red eyes. It clicked and hissed as it dropped to the deck, its movements fast and jerky, like a hunting insect. A second one was already clambering through the breach. The first V-Risk spotted Alex. It let out a high-pitched shriek, a sound of triumph and hunger, and lunged. And the dormant predator DNA in Alex Ryder's veins sang. He didn't retreat. He didn't scream. He moved forward to meet the charge. In the split second before the V-Risk reached him, he slammed his palm against the emergency release valve he'd just broken. A high-pressure jet of neon green coolant erupted from the conduit, not into the corridor, but straight out through the hull breach. The V-Risk that was halfway through the opening shrieked as the supercooled, highly volatile fluid hit its cutting torch. The explosion was magnificent. A silent, brilliant flash of green and orange light blossomed outside the ship, engulfing the scraver's work area. The V-Risk inside the ship was thrown back against the far wall by the concussive force of the sudden outgassing, its chitin cracking from the impact. It was stunned, disoriented. It was all the time Alex needed. He moved with a speed and ferocity that would have shocked his crewmates. He swung the massive wrench in a clean, horizontal arc. It was a simple, brutal, and profoundly human act of violence. The heavy steel connected with the V-Risk's narrow torso with a sickening crunch. Chitin splintered, ichor sprayed. The creature was thrown sideways, its legs folding under it. It was wounded, but not dead. It tried to rise, one of its scythe-like arms lashing out. Alex sidestepped the clumsy attack and brought the wrench down again, this time in a two-handed overhead smash directly onto its triangular head. The sound was like a melon breaking. The V-Risk collapsed into a twitching heap and was still. Silence. The only sounds were Alex's own harsh breathing and the faint, automated hiss of the emergency bulkhead trying to seal the breach. He stood over the dead scraver, the heavy wrench dripping with alien hemolymph. His heart was hammering against his ribs, not with fear, but with the exhilarating, terrifying rush of adrenaline. He felt alive, more alive than he had in years. Then he heard a skittering sound from the breach. Another one. The explosion hadn't gotten them all. On the bridge, the crew had been thrown from their feet by the shockwave. "What was that?" Zill shrieked, scrambling back to her console. "External explosion. Hull breach in Gamma 7 is venting something." Kalen pulled himself up, his bronze scales scraped from hitting the deck. "Report." I do know. The external sensors are shot. But the scraver ship it's pulling back. Its forward section is damaged." Gruck was already at the bridge door, his massive hand on the lock. He looked at Kalen, a question in his small eyes. Kalen hesitated. Ryder had told them to stay put. He had made a loud noise, a very loud noise. "Wait," the captain commanded, his voice tight. Alex heard the second V-Risk coming before he saw it. The click-skitter of its claws on the metal deck was a sound that evolution had hardwired into the nightmares of a million prey species across the galaxy. But Alex wasn't prey. This one came through the breach low and fast, staying out of the direct line of the damaged conduit. It saw its fallen comrade, saw the human standing there with his primitive weapon, and it let out a chittering hiss of rage. It was smarter than the first one. It didn't charge blindly. It began to circle, its scythe-like arms held wide, looking for an opening. Alex stood his ground, turning slowly to keep it in his sights, the wrench held ready. This was a dance as old as life itself. Predator sizing up predator. The V-Risk was faster, it had natural weapons. But Alex had a brain forged in the crucible of a world where you had to outthink your dinner and the thing that wanted to make you dinner. He was in a narrow corridor. The V-Risk's wide arm span was a disadvantage here. Its speed was negated by the lack of maneuvering room, and Alex had something else: desperation and tools. He backed up slowly, keeping his eyes locked on the creature. His foot hit a loose conduit on the floor. An idea sparked. It was a stupid, insane idea. It was perfect. The V-Risk lunged. Instead of meeting it head-on, Alex dropped. He hit the deck, rolling backward under the creature's scything attack. As the V-Risk overshot, its momentum carrying it past him, Alex grabbed the loose power conduit he just tripped over. It was thick, heavy, and still sparking intermittently from the ship-wide power surge. The V-Risk turned, surprised by the human's agility. It shrieked and charged again. Alex didn't have a wrench this time. He had a live, high-voltage power cable. As the Scraver loomed over him, he jammed the frayed, sparking end of the cable directly into the creature's open, hissing maw. Thousands of volts of raw, unregulated power coursed through the V-Risk's body. Its multiple red eyes went wide. Its limbs locked up in a massive seizure. A smell like burnt shellfish and ozone filled the corridor. The creature convulsed for a few agonizing seconds, its chitin smoking, and then it fell backward, crashing to the deck in a heap. A final, pathetic puff of smoke escaped its mouth. Alex scrambled to his feet, dropping the cable, his hands tingling from the feedback. He was breathing in ragged gasps, his body trembling with the adrenaline crash. 2 down. He had no idea how many more there were. He glanced at the hull breach. The emergency bulkhead had finally managed to slide halfway shut before jamming, leaving a gap big enough for one of them to squeeze through at a time. A choke point. His choke point. He picked up the wrench again. It felt heavier now. He took up a position beside the jammed door, out of sight from the outside. He slowed his breathing, listening. For a full minute there was nothing. Then he heard the faint scraping of claws on the outer hull. A third V-Risk cautiously poked its triangular head through the gap. It scanned the corridor, seeing its 2 dead brethren. Its head swiveled back and forth, searching for the threat. It didn't see Alex, hidden by the bulkhead. The V-Risk decided the corridor was clear and began to squeeze its thin body through the opening. The moment its torso was halfway through, Alex stepped out and swung the wrench with every ounce of strength he had, like a woodsman splitting a log. The blow caught the V-Risk on the side of its narrow neck, right where it joined the shoulders. There was a wet, snapping sound. The creature went limp, its body wedged in the door. Alex stood there, chest heaving, listening. He waited. 1 minute, 2, 5, nothing. The silence from outside was absolute. He cautiously peeked through the gap around the dead V-Risk. The Scraver ship was moving away, its damaged prow trailing plasma. They were retreating. They had taken one look at the cost of entry and decided this particular wreck wasn't worth the price. He had won. He finally let the wrench fall. It hit the deck with a deafening clang that echoed through the silent ship. He leaned against the bulkhead, his legs feeling like jelly. He looked at the carnage. The shattered chitin, the spilled ichor, the smell of cooked alien. It was horrific. And a part of him, a deep, primal part he never knew existed, was coldly, terrifyingly satisfied. He keyed his personal comm, which ran on its own power cell. "Ryder to bridge." The reply was instantaneous, Zill's voice a mix of terror and relief. "Ryder, you are alive. We saw the explosion. The Scravers are leaving." "What happened?" "Pest control," Alex said, his voice hoarse. "The immediate threat is neutralized, but I've made a bit of a mess down here, and we have a new hole in the ship." There was a pause, then Kalen's voice, low and strained. "We are opening the bridge door. We are coming to you." "Sure," Alex said, sliding down the wall to sit on the deck, suddenly feeling the full weight of exhaustion hit him. "Take your time. It's not like they're going anywhere." When the bridge door hissed open, Kalen, Zill, and Gruck found a scene from a slaughterhouse. Two dead Verisk lay in pools of their own dark fluid, their bodies broken and burned. A third was wedged grotesquely in the damaged bulkhead. And sitting in the middle of it all was their human engineer, leaning against a wall, covered in streaks of green and black alien blood, looking utterly spent. The heavy, blood-soaked wrench lay on the floor beside him. Zill let out a horrified series of clicks, her wings fluttering wildly. Gruck's eyes were wide, his usual stoicism replaced by sheer, unadulterated shock. He stared from the dead scravers to the small, soft mammal who had apparently done this. Kalen was the first to move. He stepped cautiously into the corridor, his golden eyes taking in every detail of the brutal scene. He looked at the first Verisk, its torso caved in. He looked at the second, its head a blackened, smoking ruin. He looked at the third, its neck clearly snapped. This was not a fight. This was an extermination. He finally stopped in front of Alex, looking down at the human. Alex looked up, a weary, sarcastic smile playing on his lips. "I think I voided the warranty on that coolant valve," he said weakly. Kalen didn't respond for a long moment. He was processing what he was seeing and reconciling it with everything he knew about sentient species. The Genar were strong, but they were not killers by nature. The Cathar were fast, but they fled from danger. The Borak were powerful, but they were slow to anger and fought only when cornered. They were all, in their own way, prey. They came from worlds where the primary evolutionary pressure was avoiding danger. Humans, he was beginning to realize, came from a place where the primary evolutionary pressure was being the danger. He had seen the database entries on Terra. A world of staggering biodiversity and brutal competition. A world where for millions of years, the ancestors of this creature sitting before him had to kill to eat and kill to avoid being eaten. They had evolved to be the ultimate survivors. When faced with a threat, their bodies flooded with chemicals that enhanced strength, sped up reflexes, and dulled pain. When cornered, they did not cower. They did not flee. They turned a simple tool into a weapon and methodically, efficiently dismantled the threat. "Engineer Ryder," Kalen finally rumbled, his voice filled with a new, profound emotion. It was respect, tinged with a healthy dose of absolute terror. "You have made a mess," Alex chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. "Yeah, well, they started it." Gruck stepped forward and, to everyone's surprise, gently picked Alex up as if he weighed nothing. The massive Borak carried the human engineer back towards the medbay, his movements careful, almost reverent. Zill hovered near Kalen, her multifaceted eyes locked on the captain. "Captain, what is he?" Kalen watched Gruck carry Alex away. He thought about the calm, cold voice over the comm. He thought about the brutal efficiency of the carnage. He thought about the stories of how humans had dominated their home planet in a mere few thousand years, outcompeting every other predator. "He is our engineer, Zill," Kalen said softly. "And he is something the galaxy has not seen in a very long time. He is an apex predator, and he is on our side." Zill looked at the dead Verisk again, then back down the hall where her squishy, pink, coffee-addicted friend had disappeared. A shiver ran through her insectoid body. She was suddenly very, very glad she had never, ever touched his coffee machine. The aftermath of the Scraver attack was a long, arduous process. With the immediate threat gone, Alex, patched up and running on sheer stubbornness, and a triple shot of synthesized coffee, directed the monumental task of bringing the Stardust Drifter back to life. He walked Kalen and a surprisingly deft-clawed Gruck through the process of manually resetting the primary power relays. It was tedious, dangerous work, involving carefully discharging fried capacitors and splicing melted wires in the cramped, dark service tunnels of the ship. Throughout the process, the crew's demeanor towards him had fundamentally changed. Zill no longer buzzed around him with endless questions about human culture. Instead, she brought him hydration fluids and protein cubes, her movements quiet and respectful, as if she were handling an unexploded bomb. Gruck, who had previously communicated only in grunts, now followed Alex's technical instructions with a silent, focused intensity, his massive strength proving invaluable in prying open warped panels and moving heavy components. He even, on one occasion, patted Alex gently on the shoulder, a gesture that almost sent the smaller human tumbling to the floor. Kalen observed it all from the bridge, coordinating their efforts. His commands to Alex were no longer phrased as orders but as requests. Engineer Ryder, what is your assessment of the nav computer's power coupling? Ryder, do you believe it is safe to attempt a core restart? It took them 2 full cycles of non-stop work, but finally the moment came. Alex stood in the engine room, his face smudged with grease and his jumpsuit torn, his hand hovering over the main ignition panel. "All right, Captain," he said over the comm, his voice gravelly with exhaustion. "Either this works or we all get a wonderful view of the inside of a fusion reaction. On my mark, 3, 2, 1, mark." He slammed his hand down on the panel. For a heart-stopping second, nothing happened. Then, with a low groan that built into a deep, resonant hum, the Mark IV Tarsus drive shuddered back to life. The lights flickered, stabilized, and then burned with a steady, welcome glow. The ship was alive again. A cacophony of relieved chirps, rumbles, and grunts came over the comm. "We have full power, Engineer," Zill's voice sang out, her usual manic energy returning. "All systems green, you did it. You actually fixed a ship that was medically dead." Alex allowed himself a tired grin and leaned his head against the cool metal of the drive housing. "She's a stubborn old girl," he murmured. "Just needed a little percussive persuasion." They limped into Kelvin Prime 3 cycles later, their hull patched with emergency sealant and their cargo of Tibanian crystals miraculously intact. As soon as they docked, Kalen paid the Scraver salvage fee, a standard galactic practice to avoid retaliation, and then sold the cargo for a handsome profit. That evening, the captain summoned Alex to his private office. The room was sparse, decorated only with a few Gnar ceremonial artifacts and a large star chart. Kalen was looking at a datapad when Alex entered. "Engineer Ryder," the captain began without looking up. "I have reviewed the internal sensor logs from the incident." Alex stood silently, waiting. Kalen finally looked up, his golden eyes unblinking. "The logs show you neutralized 3 V-risk boarding parties, alone, with a hydro spanner and a severed power line. They were trespassing," Alex said with a shrug. "Indeed." Kalen put the datapad down. "I have also filed a formal report with the Galactic Concord. Under reason for Scraver retreat, I have listed unexpectedly hostile onboard fauna." Alex couldn't help but snort a laugh. "Fauna? You're calling me fauna?" It seemed more diplomatic than soft-skinned death machine from high-gravity hell world, Kalen rumbled, and Alex could have sworn he saw the corner of the Gnar's mouth twitch again. "The report has caused some stir at the sector authority. They are re-evaluating the threat assessment for your species." "Happy to help," Alex said dryly. Kalen slid a datapad across the desk. On it was a contract. "This is a standard Class A engineering contract. It offers a permanent position on this vessel, a salary of 10,000 krells per cycle, and a 5% share of all cargo profits. It is a significant increase." Alex picked it up, stunned. The numbers were far beyond what he could have hoped for. "Furthermore," Kalen continued, sliding a small, heavy pouch across the desk, "this is your share from the Tibanian crystal sale, plus a significant bonus for hazard mitigation and exceptional service." Alex opened the pouch. It was filled with high-denomination credit chips. It was more money than he'd seen in his entire life. "Captain, I don't know what to say." "Say you will sign the contract, Engineer," Kalen said, his voice firm. "This vessel is old. It is problematic. It requires an engineer who is not merely a mechanic, but a creative problem solver. It has also become apparent that the Persei Traverse is more dangerous than it once was. Having a crew member with your particular skill set is a logical and strategically sound investment." Alex looked from the contract to the captain's sincere, reptilian face. He thought of Zill's endless curiosity, Gruck's silent protectiveness, and Kalen's grudging respect. He thought about the thrum of the engine he'd brought back from the dead. It wasn't just a job anymore. It was, bizarrely, home. He signed the datapad with a flourish. "You've got yourself an engineer, Captain." "Excellent," Kalen said, taking the datapad back. "Now there is one final matter." He gestured to a small crate on the floor that Alex hadn't noticed before. "This arrived for you from the station's import vendor." Alex opened the crate. Inside, nestled in protective foam, was a state-of-the-art military-grade coffee synthesizer and several vacuum-sealed bags labeled Terran Roast Dark Matter Blend. He looked at Kalen, truly speechless this time. Zill's research indicated that your homicide prevention chemical is more effective when brewed from authentic ingredients, Kalen explained. Consider it a ship's expense, for the sake of crew morale and safety. Later that cycle, the four of them gathered in the mess hall. The air was filled with the rich, unfamiliar aroma of real coffee brewing. Alex poured 4 mugs. He handed one to Zill, who sniffed it cautiously before taking a tiny sip with her proboscis. Her antennae shot straight up. Whoa, it's like a supernova in my mouth. I feel like I could calculate 1,000 jump points at once, she buzzed excitedly. He offered a mug to Gruck, who took it in his massive paw and downed the entire hot liquid in one gulp. The big Borak shuddered, his fur bristling, and then let out a long, surprisingly contented sigh. Finally, Alex slid a mug over to Kalen. The captain looked at the dark, steaming liquid with suspicion. "Come on, Captain," Alex said with a grin. "Live a little. It's for crew morale." With the air of a being facing his own execution, Kalen lifted the mug with his claws and took a small sip. His nictitating membranes blinked rapidly. His throat worked. He set the mug down. "It is," the Genar captain pronounced, "acceptable." Alex laughed, a real, genuine laugh that echoed through the small room. He took a long sip from his own mug. The coffee was perfect. The ship was stable. The crew was a bunch of weirdos who were slowly becoming his family. And out there, beyond the viewports, was a whole galaxy full of things to fix, cargo to haul, and if necessary, apex predators to hunt. The Stardust Drifter pulled out of Kelvin Prime, its old engines humming a new, steady tune. On the bridge, a squishy pink human stood next to a giant reptile, a hyperactive insect, and a furry mountain, setting a course for the next adventure. They were the oddest crew in the sector, a walking, buzzing, grunting anomaly. And they wouldn't have it any other way.